Folks, I've got a bit of a conundrum, and I think you do too, because I've seen comments about this. Is the ZX4RR a beginner bike? Well, kind of. It depends on how you look at it. In today's video, I'm going to endeavor to cover everything I can think of from a beginner rider perspective to see whether or not this bike, the ZX4RR, makes sense to start on, and if you can reasonably start on it, and what are the pitfalls of doing so. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. But remember, this ZX4RR is a giveaway bike. Yes, folks, I'm very excited about this one. This is one of the coolest little bikes you can buy right now. 399cc, inline 4, revving to 16,000 RPM. Makes a great sound, feels awesome to ride. Head over to yamanoob.co, and I think we've got a special going on right now. Every dollar you spend is 5x entries to win. And yeah, join up as a member, check out all the official rules, make sure you get entered to win this bike, because you are not going to want to miss it. So, let's try to do this, shall we? Let's try to discuss all the salient points on what makes this a beginner bike or not a beginner bike. Just as a quick note, though, I like this bike a lot. I like this bike a lot, maybe not for the reasons you think. Pretty good stock sound. So let's talk about power and power delivery. That's, I think, the most important thing beginners tend to think about. It's the first thing that beginners pop up in videos and questions and comments. They're like, oh, is that bike too fast for me to start on? And I will say, I don't think the ZX4RR is quote-unquote too fast for an entry-level rider to start on. I mean, we've often said here on the channel that an SV650 is a starter motorcycle, and an SV650 makes more power and torque stock for stock than a ZX4RR. So I can't really in good conscience say that this bike is too fast for a beginner to start on. It's really not. And also, the delivery of the power is very gentle. Compared to an R7 or an SV650, which are other, I'd call them like beginner plus motorcycles, it's very gentle. You know, you roll on the power here, it builds very gradually, very linearly, and I really think that a beginner would appreciate that. It doesn't slap you with torque. It's not scary from low down in the RPMs. So from a beginner perspective of power and delivery, I think it's okay. Like I'm in third gear right now. I can whack it wide open, and it's really not that scary. I don't think anyone would really get themselves out of sorts with this. Low speed maneuvers would be very, very good with this motorcycle because of that power delivery, but also because of point number 2, which is weight, ergonomics, and seat height. Those, I think, are the most important factor when it comes to a beginner bike. You really don't want a big, tall, heavy ADV bike as your first motorcycle. You want something you can very comfortably flat foot if need be, or get close to flat footing. And this motorcycle really does that very well. The ergonomics package here is virtually identical to a Ninja 400. If you were to sit on a Ninja 400 and if you were to sit on a ZX4RR, you would find them to be very, very comparable. The reach to the bars on this bike is very, very chill. The kind of leg folding, peg placement, seat ratio, that stuff is all really solid here. So honestly, for a beginner, that stuff's really going to feel really good on this bike, you know? A Ninja 400, we often say, is the cream of the crop when it comes to a beginner bike, and this bike, from an ergonomics perspective, is virtually identical, which is great. Let's talk about some of the downsides of this as a beginner bike. I think the first, and it's the elephant in the room, this thing's freaking expensive, dude. I think MSRP for this is $11,000 or thereabouts. I paid $13,000 out the door for this thing. I had to purchase this with my own money, as you know I do with my giveaway motorcycles. I don't rely on anybody to buy them for me because I like having complete autonomy over what I say and do with these bikes. It makes the whole thing a lot better. But yeah, number one, you can't really find these things in dealerships. And number two, you know, if you do, you're gonna spend close to $13,000 on one, no doubt about it. It's just one of those bikes that the demand is super high for these things. So if you don't spend 13 grand, somebody else is going to spend 13 grand because it's very novel. It's a brand new motorcycle, brand new frame, all that good stuff. And it's really cool. I mean, it's the only bike you can really ring out as an inline 4 on the street within reason, you know? Little pocket rocket. So yeah, I think beginner bikes should be cheap. I really don't think you should spend a lot of money on your first motorcycle because the common thought is you're not going to keep it. Now, the ZX4, you would definitely want to keep this motorcycle. This is not a pump and dump kind of bike. You wouldn't want to grab this thing and just ride it for a season and then sell it because the experience of upgrading, right? Because right now, let's say you follow the Kawasaki, kind of trajectory here. Let's say you start off on a Ninja 400 or a 650, right? Pretty comparable. One's a little more torquey and a little bit bigger, but functionally the same starting point, right? Let's say Ninja 400. Before this motorcycle, you kind of had to step up to the ZX6, and guys, the leap from a 400 to a ZX6 is pretty stratospheric. Those motorcycles are outrageously different. You know, the ZX6 is committed, it's aggressive, it's got an aluminum twin spar frame, it's rigid, it's racy, it just wants to go, 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 you know? Whereas the ZX4 and the Ninja 400s, they're much more docile, but where it matters is coming from a parallel twin, ooh, that's some dirt in the road, coming from a parallel twin Ninja 400 to a ZX6, the experience is wildly different. You'll feel like you massively upgraded, and you'll be so excited to ride a real rocket ship of a motorcycle. It's got that screaming inline 4, makes a boatload of horsepower. It's a ton of fun. Whereas if you get a ZX4, guys, functionally speaking, especially after you get an exhaust and a tune on this thing, which you will do, which I'm going to talk about in just a second because it is part of the beginner experience, the experience here is very similar to a ZX6. Yes, it makes less power and the ergos are a little bit more comfortable, but functionally, I've got a screaming inline 4 that I get to rev out. And so if I jump to a ZX6, I'll say, okay, it's this, but more. You know, it's the same experience, but just cranked up a little bit. You have the same cylinders, same feeling from the engine, and so that leap isn't as crazy. So back to my original point of if you would keep this motorcycle, I think you would, you know? And the big reason why is because it's already been well documented that this motorcycle is massively detuned from Kawasaki for the North American market. This thing makes only about 53 horsepower at the wheel, in stock trim, where you can get a flash for it, and then you'll be making 73 horsepower at the wheel. Put an exhaust, you'll get close to 80 horsepower at the wheel with this thing. And now you're talking a proper middleweight fighting motorcycle. You know, that's more power than an R7 at the top end. I think an R7's quoted at 75, 80 horsepower crank. So it makes way more power at the tire than an R7. Granted, the torque's not there, you know, it's not going to feel rowdy like an R7. But a lot of people prefer the screaming inline 4. They want the feeling of the bike really revving and screaming and doing the whole thing. And I think with the flash, it gives this motorcycle more flexibility in terms of the bike you can grow into, quote unquote. This is something you hear all the frickin' time with squids about 600s. They're like, bro, get a 600, you'll grow into it. That's nonsense, don't listen to those people. This ZX4, however, stock, it's a place that I would personally feel comfortable recommending to a confident beginner rider. You know, if you're very unsure of yourself, I wouldn't recommend this bike. But, you know, if you're a confident beginner rider, you know, maybe you've got a little bit of motorcycling experience, some scooter experience, some dirt bike experience, you can start on this thing. And then, because it doesn't have selectable power modes that are just way too easy for you to flip and then just crank up the power. I think the whole rider mode thing is ridiculous to say, oh, bro, I'll control myself, bro. Like, I'll just keep it in D mode. I'll keep it in rain mode. No, you won't. You're going to ride that thing around the block a couple days, and then you're going to see what the full power feels like, because we're base creatures, and that's what we want, The barrier to getting this to make more power is a little more complicated. You have to pony up a couple $100. You have to take the ECU out. You have to ship it out. You have to receive it back, reinstall it, put an exhaust on. You got to do a couple steps to unlock the next level on this bike, which is really cool for a beginner. So I think if you're not that price conscious for your first motorcycle, but again, 13 grand for your first bike, that's a lot of money. I wouldn't spend more than 5 or maybe even 6 tops on my first motorcycle. That's just way too much cash. But again, if you really are committed to it and you want to keep it long term, this thing does make a lot of sense. Let's talk insurance. That's something that nobody's really talking about, the ZX4, and I think is a big blind spot for a lot of people, because I think they're going to get sticker shock when they go to try to insure this thing. Why is that? Well, for most insurance companies here in America, at least, you have to list what the model is, what the displacement is, and what the engine is. I think because this thing is so brand spanking new, most insurance companies aren't going to give a damn that it only makes 52 horsepower. They're going to say, oh, what? Ninja ZX 4-cylinder? Yeah, go ahead and bill it at the super sport rate. It's a crotch rocket. That's what they're going to view it as, and that's what they're going to bill you for. So I would say before you pull the trigger on a ZX4RR, get some insurance quotes to see if you can stomach paying for it, because it actually might be a very big thorn in your side for this as your first motorcycle. So definitely shop around for that before you get this bike. The other point I want to make is this motorcycle from a repair and maintenance perspective. Now, granted, a lot of stuff on this bike is Kawasaki parts bin. I think the motor and the frame are really the only thing that's very unique to this bike. Everything else, the switchgear, this master cylinder, the TFT, all this stuff is Kawasaki parts bin special. So you'll be able to service this motorcycle pretty easily if you drop it or, bin it or do whatever. So that should be pretty simple. Just got some fun with this thing. Drop the gear down here. Tightens up on this corner. Yeah, this is a good motorcycle. But it's completely unique. This is, for those of you that want the inline 4 experience, but you're reasonable, this is it. You can start on an inline 4 now. No one would get mad at you for starting on a ZX4RR. This is such a cool motorcycle to start on, and you get the inline 4 soundtrack. This feels like a real racy bike, because it is. The freaking thing revs at 16,000 RPM, and you could actually enjoy it and use it, as a beginner rider. So that's why it's kind of like, it's in that weird spot like the SV650 and the R7, where it's like beginner plus, like it's got a lot of interesting things about it, I really think it does, and I think a beginner could really come to enjoy it. The fact that it has a quick shifter up and down, you might say, oh, yam, that sucks, they're not going to learn how to use the clutch. Well, you can just turn it off, and then you can learn to just operate the bike with the clutch, and then when you're ready to really feel the fun of an auto blipper and a quick shifter, you can turn it on and have some fun with it, The fact that it has traction control is great for beginner riders. It's going to protect you in case of wet weather or the random pothole or something that you're not familiar with. I think the bike has a lot going for it for technology that will assist beginner riders on their journey if you get this as a first motorcycle. And what a freaking first motorcycle this would be, man. Are you kidding me? When I started riding back in 2015, there was nothing like this on the market. Nothing. We were happy that it was an R3. I was like, oh man, the R3 is such a cool looking bike. And a big thing about this bike is pride of ownership. Beginners really tend to get in their heads about owning a dumpy little beginner bike and blah, blah, blah. Dude, this bike, anybody that sees you with it is going to give you props, because this is such a cool and unique motorcycle. Everybody I've showed this thing to who knows anything about bikes is just like, oh man, that's the ZX4, right? That thing's so sick. Because it is sick. It's freaking awesome. It's this screaming little 399cc inline 4. And I don't know. I think that the only hurdle that this presents for a beginner rider is cost. You know, if you don't want to spend much money on your motorcycle for your first one, yeah, the ZX4 is not going to be the right fit. If you are more well-to-do and you don't mind dropping 13 grand on your first bike and you want to keep it for a long time, you can definitely make the case for this thing. I think you really can. So guys, as we crest over this hill with the beautiful view of Austin, Texas and the lake over here, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think the ZX4 is a beginner bike, if it's not a beginner bike. I think that I kind of covered everything, the ergos, the price, the feeling of the engine, the power. That's really the basic stuff that comes down to it for a beginner rider. So yeah, I think it can be done. Much like an SV650, an R7, all that stuff, it quote-unquote can be done. This bike can be done. I think that from my semi-professional opinion as a guy who's ridden damn near 300 different motorcycles, do this for a living, all that good stuff, this is a place that I would feel relatively comfortable recommending to a well-heeled, confident beginner rider. I think most people are better served on a Ninja 400, but this bike is super cool, and sometimes you just want a cool motorcycle. So guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. Remember, this ZX4RR is a giveaway motorcycle. Be sure to check that out in the description below. Don't miss your chance to win this bike for free. If you don't want to buy it, you just want to get it for free, that is one way to do it. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Keep watching Gaming Noob!